I'd like to thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 5th edition of Series 2 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. For those of you that tried to tune in last week to my show, I do apologize. I didn't finish the story that I was reading for my Halloween edition of the show. And for those of you that did stick it out and try to bear with me, I do apologize for not being able to finish the story. I ran out of time, and for, again, having the patience to stick through and try to bear with me as those that bore with me as I tried to read the story. Anyway, a couple of things to start. Obviously, most people are aware that Mike Hansen did not win the race for Precinct 4 for County Commissioner here in Travis County, and that is very unfortunate for every person here in Austin, although I know that that's not going to stop Mike Hansen from doing the fine work that he does here for the community and all the good things that he does in a selfless manner to try to help people out and try to make people aware and try to, again, do good things to help out the fellow people here in Travis County and elsewhere also. And I would like to thank him for his efforts in trying to be an elected official and do what it takes to pull that off. I know it's not an easy task, and it's a very thankless job in most instances, especially if you're really on the side of the people, that you're really up against insurmountable odds. And so this election, unfortunately, did not restore my faith in the election process and in the local elections as I hoped it might. Everything really panned out the way the elections ultimately panned out nationwide to really allow situations to further go on the course that they are, in the sense of allowing basically those that wish to enslave us, those that have ulterior motives and an agenda that's not in the best interest of the bulk of humanity and the people in this country, and that those are the individuals that best benefited from the election results and the way that things panned out. And so I don't really want to get into the particulars of the election process all that much, but just to say that no surprises when it was all said and done, unfortunately, and again, my faith in the election process is questionable at best. Excuse me. Also, I'd like to mention that this third Wednesday of the month will be the metaphysical and philosophical meetings that we host, and we co-host with Jeff Contreras of the show Therefore I Am. And so, that being the case, this third Wednesday of November falls on the 20th, and I'd like to encourage everyone to come down, to take the opportunity to just hang out and chat. We'll be there for several hours, and pretty much the sky's the limit. Anything that you're interested in talking about is fair game. And I'd like to thank Jeff and his fine crew for throwing us greetings and salutations as of late on this show. And I'd like to encourage all of you out there to do yourselves a favor and to check out Therefore I Am. That's at 10 on Channel 10 every Tuesday, along with some of the other shows. There are a lot of other fine shows that still exist down here that I would encourage you to take the time and opportunity to view if you're able to. A lot of informative shows that are down here. A lot of people trying to do their community service in a sense and try to, again, inform the people and try to bring some resolution to some of the problems that we face both locally and on a larger scale. And so again, I'd like to thank Jeff and his crew for taking the time to give us props, if you will, and to remind folks that we're here every Thursday at 9 on Channel 10. So I'd encourage you folks also to check us out if you have an opportunity as well, every Thursday. And to get into this evening's show topic, the title of the show is Creative Thinking, and that basically, what I want to get into in relation to the idea of creative thinking is essentially how to build with thought in mental matter. And that might be a bit more of a confusing way to put this. But this process of creative thinking or constructive thinking is basically a scientific process by which one concentrates upon a thing, an exercise, some condition. By concentrating on something, one is able to manifest a characteristic, a quality, or an event, or some object into one's life. And so again, that is a scientific process. It's again a creative process, and the whole idea and the whole concept is based on the mind principle and the idea of thought. Now, this science, or this way to create using thought, can also be destructive as well as creative, but I don't really want to emphasize the destructive aspects, although they do have their place. As far as individuals are concerned, it's much more in our best interest that we try to concentrate more so on constructive as opposed to destructive ways of being able to think and to access information. Now, to start, it would be helpful to revisit some of the previous themes that I've covered on the show. And the one theme that I constantly bring up that's a good building block for all esoteric science is the concept of man being a multi-staged individual. That all individuals, all mankind, excuse me, are multi-dimensional beings, if you want to use that term. And there are many differentiations of man as far as him being threefold, sevenfold, ninefold, twofold at the very basic, if you want to just consider man both spirit and matter. But for the basis and for the benefit of today's explanation, I'd like to consider man as a threefold individual, and how those three individual bodies relate to one another, and how, again, this process of creative thinking or building with thought in mental matter can be accomplished, but some prerequisites have to be in order, and some things have to be laid down in order for there to be a basis or building blocks in order for this creative thinking process to actually take root and to be successful. And so again, considering that individual man is threefold, and that we have the dense physical body that we're aware of, that everyone works through and moves through in our daily lives, and that behind that, or attached to that, superimposed with that, however you want to term it, is an emotional or an astral body. And that is of a more refined substance, and so it's not readily visible to our sight, although it does exist nonetheless. And then outside of that, or superimposed with the other two lesser bodies, would be what would be considered the mental body, or the concept of mind. And those three interpenetrate one another and work together to form this cohesive activity. This activity, this moving, this emotional action, and the mental activity that all blends together to make us what we are, and what we are doing, thinking, or feeling at any given time. And so different people are going to be predisposed, maybe more so to an emotionally centered, and some will be more mentally centered, and then a lot of humanity is still centered in the dense physical aspect, which, to put it in the more technical and proper terms, the dense physical is not truly a principle. It's more like the caboose at the end of the train, the etheric or the energy body that animates this physical dense vehicle that again is tied to the emotion and is tied to the mental aspect. That is the real proper body that we should be considering. Again, the dense physical being a non-factor, or something that occurs after the fact. Again, like the caboose at the end of the train, all the activity, all the motive and the motion is with the forward cars, the engine on down the line, and then the caboose again doesn't have any thought or motive or motion of its own, aside from being pulled along blindly by the engine cars in the train, to use that analogy. And so the key to begin with is to not be predisposed to any one of these three bodies, but to find a balance between the three, so that the energy or etheric body is aligned with the emotional or astral, or sometimes termed the desire body, and that those two are in turn aligned with the mental capacity. And so that being the case, the three would be, again, a form of enlightenment, or an integration is another term that can be used. And through this integrated personality, this collective, where one aspect is not the dominant aspect, but they all kind of snap and fall in line and form a sort of a balancing between the three that allow the transmission of energy, force and energy, to be moved through the physical vessel, through the physical vehicle or physical vessel. And that again is a scientific process, and it takes an exercise of both our heart and our heads, in that we have to work in order to, again, find some balance in our lives that can be the basis for this creative thinking process. In order to build in mental matter, or to work with thoughts, it is very, very crucial and key that this integrated or aligned personality be the foundation or the basis for any further activity. If there is an imbalance, so to speak, and the emotions override, or the mental and analytical thinking process overrides the whole relationship between the three vehicles, then there won't be the balance that will be needed to do some effective work in this sense. And so to do the most potent and effective work possible, it's very, very crucial to start with a balance between these three and to have this base of the three individual aspects of our physical body, which again would be the etheric or energy body, the astral or emotional body, and the mental body, the faculty of mind. And how those three work together and are integrated to form again a pure channel so that man can tap into these higher aspects of oneself and or other higher aspects that man has access to via this means and has access to through this scientific process. And so again, finding this balance is key, and detaching oneself from daily events is also a big part of this. And I spoke about detachment and discrimination and some of these things in a previous show a couple of weeks ago, and how it is very important to keep oneself removed from a lot of the things that go on in our daily lives. For instance, if we're driving to work and we get upset in the traffic, and then we get to work and then maybe somebody starts yelling or is in a bad mood, and so they throw their bad vibe your way. All of these things constantly bombard us during our day, and whether they be our own emotional reactions to circumstances or our own analytical thinking towards circumstances that come up, it's key and very important to try during the day at all times to maintain some semblance of balance, some orderly process to one's activity during the day, so that we don't get sidetracked and derailed from an event that may take place. Again, whether we have a bad ride into work or whatever the case may be, that's going to predispose us to, again, an emotional flux or turmoil, or some way of thinking that is not productive. It's more negative thinking, and that's going to make us overall negative if we think negative, because it's a pretty well-known axiom that as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. And that falls into line with this as well. As far as amalgamating oneself into this proper vessel in order to be a more capable and more potent mover of energy. And so that being the case, we have to watch ourselves and check ourselves during the day, during this, exercising this process, so that we can find the means to move through obstacles during the day so that they don't affect us. It's good to be aware of things, but not overly, again, emotional or overly analytical about any events that take place. It's good to gauge things and understand them for what they are, but to not internalize certain things and just gauge it in a detached manner as an observer, seeing things happening outside of oneself, as opposed to taking things internally and seeing how that affects me and feeling that things affect oneself personally. To take things personally is going to be a deterrent in this whole scientific process. And so again, it's a matter of being this unified personality so that this energy can be transmitted successfully and with the fullest and utmost potency, and not be deflected and diverted into various channels and just carried off and made basically useless and rendered impotent because the focus was not aligned in that sense. And so peace of mind and peace of heart to a certain degree are crucial, again, building blocks. Now, a peaceful heart doesn't necessarily mean that it's a stillness. There is still activity, and there still has to be that fervent devotion, that fervent fire behind the heart aspect in order to be successful in this type of work. And so again, keeping that peaceful center, that calm center, to allow oneself to be unmoved by circumstances that take place during the day, so that again we can be the best transmitters, the most capable and able servants of the race that we can be. And it's also kind of like being the eye of the hurricane. So keeping oneself calm in the midst of seeming chaos and unrest and turmoil, that one maintains that calm center of balance and can work more effectively and more potently from that center. Now, what exactly does it mean to to think creatively or to build in mental matter? Certainly there is matter and there is substance even at these higher levels, at these more refined levels. So what we see here is the dense physical certainly has substance, and we can acknowledge it, we can see it, and we can recognize it. It's a tangible thing that we can identify. But outside of that, the emotional body does exist, and the mental body does exist as well. They're just a more refined matter than this dense physical matter that we move through in our physical vehicle. And so that being the case, it is still there, it still exists, but it's just not as easily discernible or as readily recognizable as this dense physical vehicle. And so that being the case, this fine and refined matter can be enacted and moved by our thinking, by our thoughts. And there's a saying also that energy follows thought, and that is the key component to this whole science as well. If you want to sum it up in 3 words, energy follows thought. That's the key component to this whole ideology, this whole scientific endeavor. And by thinking, we're able to create. And so by an exercise of the will, and in particular a very one-pointed and unswerving exercise of the will, and this mental working, this mental moving, that we are able truly to create within this more refined substance, and for this finally to make its way from the original inception, the original creative thought, to an actual endeavor. And that can take the form of many things, but it just basically depends on what an individual wants to see made manifest and how much they're willing to keep focused and keep the thought, or whatever it is that we're trying to make manifest, to keep it centered in one's thinking. And that's a tricky process because, again, we get caught up and sidetracked by daily occurrences and daily events, and it's very easy to be swayed and deflected from this moving, this one-pointed moving of energy, and to stay focused. Staying focused is the key. To stay focused and concentrate upon whatever it is one wishes to see made manifest is the key aspect to this. And this also ties into public consciousness as well, and public opinion, that certain things take root into the mainstream and they become maybe a fashion trend, maybe the craze to follow a certain sports team that's on a hot streak and they're doing well, and so that takes hold of the mainstream, and so everybody jumps on the bandwagon to take part of this event or this activity or this endeavor or whatever this creation may be. And it may be something that we're consciously concentrating on and willing to manifest itself, or it may be something that we're unconsciously aware of, and somehow we just get caught up and swept up in this activity, and we find ourselves being part of it and just carried along by the emotionalism or what have you. And so that being the case, the key to focus and be one-pointed is a stepping stone that's going to lead to the successful creation. And the initial step is to, again, envision in one's mind what it is that one wants to accomplish. And that is sometimes called a seed thought. And people that are interested in meditation, there is a type of meditation, or there's an aspect of meditation that is called meditation with seed. And that essentially means focusing in during one's meditative process on one certain capacity, ability, set of circumstances, group of individuals, what have you, that one's going to find oneself concentrating and meditating with seed. And so we have to find ourselves getting into that contemplative and thinking mode so that we can do the successful work to bring this thought down to the physical plane. And the process basically happens in the sense that this thought that we think in our minds that we're being one-pointed about, we're focusing on this concept, whatever it may be. For instance, if it's getting another job, for instance, if we want to use that simple analogy. And to ask for something for oneself is not necessarily a bad thing, because certainly we all need the means in which to live in life, and whether that be a career or mode of transportation, financial means, these sort of things. It's not necessarily that attaining these things is evil or anything like that. A lot of times we need to bring things into our lives in order to do greater, fuller work and just to basically exist and to get by. And certainly transportation would be one of those, again, a career that one would enjoy as opposed to a type of job that one dreads going to on a daily basis. If we can try to manifest these things in our lives, we'll be all around healthier and just better people all the way around. Our state of mind and our stress levels will go way down also. And so that being the case, as we focus on this, again, if we're going to use the example of a new career or a new job, first of all, it's a matter of focusing on a new job. And certainly we want to concentrate on some of the details that are involved in what we want to bring true to fruition. And so, for instance, if we want to get a job where we are, for instance, doing some kind of office work or some kind of clerical work, then we're going to obviously concentrate on that, and we're going to kind of envision. And that is the key thing too, envisioning or visualizing what it is we want. And detail serves to enhance and to qualify, to characterize, and to bring into manifestation more successfully what it is that we're trying to endeavor to bring into manifestation. And so if we're considering a clerical job or something along those lines, we want to definitely think about the office environment that we're working in. You want to think about what type of work you're going to be doing, what the workload will be, maybe, for instance, what the dress code would be if it's a casual dress environment. Do you want to work in a casual environment? Do you want to work in a more strict and rigid work environment? Are you a very detail-oriented person? Are you into more having fun and just kind of hanging out during the course of the workday? All of these things are what you're going to want to think about and visualize and have a little movie in your mind, if you will, of what you want to take place and what it is you want to get involved in. And certainly that can take place at other levels too. Even at the level of having a relationship, a lot of people feel that they need to be in a relationship, that they need to be with another person, and so they're going to visualize and envision their perfect partner, and they're going to, maybe at some level, try to contemplate the height, weight, the size, the proportions, maybe eye color, hair color, any number of things that they deem important that they're going to try to bring into their lives at some level. And so this, again, this creative thinking, it can be more for selfish ends, again, like I said just now, in bringing in a relationship into one's life. And it can be more altruistic as far as something that one is endeavoring to do or to create or bring about in order to help others or to improve the lives of others. And that, to me, is my personal reason for getting into this science and trying to master this science at some level, so that I can improve my own creative capacity, my own latent ability to be able to help others and to be able to salvage humanity and to work for the saving of the race at some level. And many individuals are working at different levels in order to do just that. And it's just a matter of understanding the larger picture and being aware that there are many individuals that are working at various levels. And certainly it's useful to be mindful of the fact that there are those that are working against the bulk of humanity, that are working to enslave the bulk of humanity, and that are working to meet ends that are custom tailored to just a very handful of individuals on this planet, and that they fly in the face of a global approach, and that they fly in the face of any real expression of sharing and of an unselfish expression. There are, again, a handful of individuals that are working strictly to enslave us, for lack of a better term, and they are working and doing what they can by this very same process, although the means and the methods do differ somewhat. But again, there are those that work using this process to try to enslave us and to try to increase their own standing and their own state of affairs. And so I think that's unfortunate, but that's part and parcel of what we are up against. And so it is, again, important to be aware that there are individuals that are working against us also. But if we can eliminate worry and eliminate stress, that is very urgent as well. Because being aware at a certain level that there's shadiness in high places, it's certainly good for us to be aware, but not to internalize, and I've spoken about that on this show many times as well. to understand what's going on and to have a well-rounded education and understanding of events behind the scenes is very helpful. But to internalize, when we take in and internalize fear, uncertainty, these are the things that they also take root, and they also are like seeds, and they will bear fruit, although it won't be a good positive fruit. There'll be negative results that'll come along as a result of that. And so we have to be very careful as to what it is also that we choose to concentrate on, because in our lives, if we are very fearful and if we're afraid of being alone or any number of things, if we concentrate on those things solely and exclusively, then we're going to manifest these negative aspects in our lives, and they're going to drag us down, and they're going to prevent us from having this fuller, more positive, creative expression. And so again, it's a matter of, again, having a seed thought in mind and then staying one-pointed and focused enough to where this idea or this concept or this object that we're trying to manifest will eventually be able to flesh itself out. And it's very much like the process of a baby being born in the womb, that it has to be constantly nurtured and nourished so that it can be fed and grow and again ultimately become its own thing. It starts, inside of the woman, obviously, and then at some point later down the road becomes its own livingness, its own actual existence. And so that is very much like the thought form that I'm describing. And again, it's going to depend on one's motive as to what one chooses to use this process to accomplish. And that's key to remember too. It's a lot like the Force in Star Wars. The motive is going to be dependent more so. The science is going to retain the process is going to retain the sameness. It's just a matter of motive more so. And so keeping that in mind, it's important to understand what's going on and to educate ourselves, but to keep fear here as opposed to internalizing fear and taking fear in and letting that become a part of us and sidetracking and deflecting our good energies. Because we can get caught up in a lot of negativity and let it drag us down and let it overwhelm us and then short-circuit us and keep us from, again, having a fuller expression, a more creative expression, and doing some actual good and positive work. If we feel that we're up against insurmountable odds and that there's just no real use in trying to make an effort, then we're going to find ourselves, again, sidetracked and held up. Now, as far as a state of one's heart that should be held firm is an earnest, open heart, an open, loving heart. And that again is part of this basis, is to have as far as a creative expression is concerned. Now certainly you can be a selfish person and not have this earnest, open heart and still be successful in this process. But in order to work creatively for the helping of others, it's key and essential to have this earnest heart, an open, loving heart. And that is just something that's going to have to develop in oneself. It can be activated by certain events and what have you, but it's going to have to be something that's largely self-initiated, as far as one having the desire, if you will, to be a help to other individuals and to bring across some expression that's going to be of a benefit to the race. And so again, this earnest heart is crucial to begin with, an earnest, open, loving heart, and then that can proceed into wisdom. Knowledge applied intelligently with love is wisdom. And so when we work in a wise fashion, then again, much good work can be done. So it's incumbent upon us to work in this process so that we can achieve the best, most fruitful results. Now, and then ultimately it boils down to intelligent activity, and that this thinking process will finally work its way into some activity, some expression, and that will be viewable, noticeable, demonstratable on the physical plane. And so, again, it's the big part of the process is coming up with an idea or a concept, keeping it firmly in one's thinking, and building upon it little by little, and keeping the details fresh in one's mind. Now, there's a paradox in this to the degree that one can't be emotionally attached. One can be emotionally attached to whatever it is one's trying to create, and that can alter, sway, slant, color, taint. It could alter the outcome ultimately by one's own personal desires. And now certainly if we have a strong desire for something to manifest itself in our lives, there's always the saying as well, be careful what you ask for, you may just get it. And that does hold true, that we oftentimes do end up getting what we ask for. And so what we think we may desire, or what we feel we may desire to be manifest into our lives, at one point in time, by the time it actually does make itself manifest, if we are indeed that desirous and that one point in our focus, if we do bring these things to our into activity, whether that be through in the event of a relationship or any set of circumstances that one sets the currents up and willingly is desirous enough and one-pointed enough to help magnetically link up to this, again, whether it's an object or a set of circumstances, and bring them to oneself and bring them into one's environment so that they end up playing themselves out in some active expression on the physical plane. And so, again, desire does factor in, and desire is going to either propel like a fuel and propel whatever this creative thinking may be, or it's going to hinder and deflect and taint it to a certain degree, that what the original intention was does not pan out and is not born the way that one originally intended. And so the thought form, at the very worst, would be aborted, or it would be maybe like an analogy might be, it might be similar to an autistic child, that not exactly what you envisioned initially was born and made manifest. And so we have to be cautious as to the level of desire. The best way to approach this science, if you will, is with an understanding and a knowing. Now that goes back to what I initially spoke of about being the integrated or aligned personality, and that the emotional aspect and the mental aspect don't overweigh and cause an imbalance. There has to be, again, a balance to begin with so that this process can be more fruitful and it can be more potent and can be more capable in what it's set out to do. And so, again, we have to be very careful with this desire aspect to not be too desirous, because then we're going to alter or sway the results, and things are not going to manifest themselves in the way that we originally had hoped or intended. And so it is good to be one-pointed, and that's part of it. We have to be one-pointed and focused in what it is we wish to bring out in our lives. But again, not to be overly emotional about it. We have to just remain in a sort of quiet and calm confidence that what we set out and endeavor to bring into manifestation will indeed work its way to the physical plane. There has to be that knowing and that faith, if you will, that these events will play themselves out, and then what is sought after will make itself known and factual into our active expression in our environment. And so there's also that waiting that has to take place too, that patience that has to come into play as well, that one, again, has to have, again, if you want to use the analogy that I spoke of earlier, of the eye of the hurricane, the calm in the center of the storm, that in spite of this chaos, this seeming chaos, one remains in this calm center, and one remains patient in the sense of maybe riding the storm out, if you want to use that to follow up on the analogy, riding the storm out and waiting, and again, having that understanding and that knowing that eventually the storm will break and that the sun will rise and that all things will be set aright. And that's just, again, part of the concept of faith. But again, it gets to a point past that to where it's a knowing. It's an understanding, a knowing, and again, a calm confidence. The calm confidence has to proceed and has to be part and parcel of this work as well. If we let emotionalism carry in, if we let the fear of failure, the fear of limitation set in, then the work is going to be stifled. To avoid this limitation, we have to work in a very one-pointed and unafraid manner, and that's key to this whole thing too. The type of work that we hope to carry out, and also to this visualization process, to be opened to whatever may come down the pike, in the sense that if we need some funds to be made available in our lives, we need some money somehow, that we don't necessarily want to concentrate too much on the specific means. Like, for instance, winning the lottery, for instance. You don't want to put all of your energy and spend all of your energy thinking, okay, I need money, so I need to win the lottery, and put all of your energy and effort into that direction, because that's going to possibly deter and deflect that energy from other potential legitimate ways for you to gain some income into your life. And so it's good to be open in this process too, to be open to different aspects of how this may play out, because we never really know how things are going to materialize. If we have that faith and that confidence that the work will carry itself forward and will work itself out, we have to be open to the way in which it may fulfill itself. And it could take on a myriad, multiple, different ways of fulfilling itself. It's for us to keep our eyes open and be awake and aware, and again, open to different possibilities as to what may pan itself out. And so again, visualizing what we want and staying emotionally aloof or unattached from what it is that we want in the best instances. Obviously, that won't take place in every instance. But to do the kind of creative work that I'm discussing, where it's helping other people, and a non-selfish and an altruistic way of thinking, that it is best to avoid the desire factor and just know in one's heart and one's mind that one is working towards an expression that will help others in some way, in some level. And so that is my hope, that people will consider this in light of that process, consider the process in light of that, in those circumstances, that this can be used to help other people. Certainly it can be used to hinder and hurt others as well, but that ultimately is what I would consider black magic, and I'm trying to divert attention away from the negative uses of this science, and to let people concentrate more so on the positive benefits that can be made manifest through use of this science. So we'd like to go ahead and grab a call and see what's going on this evening. Hello, caller, are you on the air?
Yes, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks. I was just wondering about, okay, what if one has these fantasies and they're a little bit twisted, but yet you don't really mean to have like in reality, these fantasies, but sometimes, thoughts can just have a wild imagination. Could it possibly manifest into a future? Will it eventually manifest itself into reality eventually, even though if you don't mean to think like that all the time as fantasy?
Well, that's a good question. That's a very good question, actually. Now, certainly all of us are going to have these underlying unconscious whims, wishes, desires, what have you. Certain people are going to be conscious of that and keep those in check and keep those stifled. Now, that may lead to its own neurosis and its own psychosis as a result of, stifling oneself and keeping things bottled up, if you will. But there can be that aspect of that imagining that can be a healthy outlet at some levels, and it's kind of like in the concept of watching horror fiction, watching a horror film, where you see, something grisly taking place and there are murders taking place, but knowing that it is not real and it's just supposedly it's for entertainment's sake, and that will allow us to kind of blow off some steam in a sense, and to get to that imaginative space without allowing those kind of emotions to overwhelm us and cause us to go out and do something like that in real life, in our own lives. We have to have that fine line to keep us in check, if we so choose, from actually carrying out these things. And when you talk about twisted thoughts and twisted ideas, it is true that as a man thinks, so he is. And so by virtue of thinking a certain way, You know, whether you're consciously choosing to entertain these thoughts or whether it is that they just kind of creep their way in and find their way into and infiltrate your thinking, nonetheless, that does at some level form a part of you, a part of what you are by virtue of it being what you're thinking. Now again, if you consciously feed and nurture these, what you term twisted thoughts, that may not be such a good thing, and you may find that you're going to reap the fruits of whatever this twisted so-called thoughts may be, and so you have to be very cautious. They can take root, and at the worst levels what takes place is these twisted ideas, if you want to term them that, are part of an infringement on our free will, and there can be other entities, if you want to look at it metaphysically, that can possess us, if you will, possess our thinking process and can cause us to act and think against our will to a certain degree. But it's by us allowing that to creep in and infiltrate us. If we stay strong and we acknowledge these things but don't entertain these things, then we can keep them in check and we can keep them under wraps and have a healthy balance in our lives. But any kind of twisted thinking or unhealthy or negative thoughts, if you think about hating someone, for instance, and you constantly think hate, 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 it's basically a self-destructive mechanism on your own human body, your own physical vehicle, and it's going to come back like a boomerang and affect you in a negative way. So you have to be very careful as to what you think, whether or not these thoughts are just, like I said, just flittering into your mind randomly, or whether you consciously are bringing them in or entertaining them and nurturing them and causing them to hang around. You know, that's something that you're going to have to decide in your own life, how you choose to, again, either kind of keep them, well, I don't want to say bottled up, or, you know, you want to acknowledge them, but you want to overcome them at some level. If you don't, then you might find yourself succumbing to them.
Right.
Is there anything else you care to add?
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about what you're saying, and you see, okay, certain people have, you know, certain fantasies and stuff like that, and even they would probably think of it every day, like, you know, maybe a couple hours a day or something on the internet, but, you know, the internet can be a very, how should I say, a very influential thing, and your mind can be stuck on one point, you know, of view, and have these different fantasies, and then you go back to reality, and you're like, whoa, what was I thinking? But you get on there again, and there it is again. And how do you just keep away from that and keep it from altering your mind before it you know?
Well, I'm going to go and let you go and answer that off the air, but basically what that boils down to is just keeping oneself detached from certain things. If we know certain things are going to influence us a certain way and they're going to limit us or compromise us in some way, then we're going to have to keep that in check, if you will. Keep detached and try to use the attitude of the observer, if you want to use a metaphysical term, where imagine one watching your actions. Imagine you, a version of you, watching what you're doing and just looking at it in a detached manner and just being a casual observer. Imagine if someone was just, and had access to your thinking process and had access to your emotional process and knew what you were feeling and thinking about any individual thing, you know, and then start to question, you know, what is the benefit, what are the drawbacks. But ultimately, if we entertain this thinking, it sounds, you know, you're saying going back to the computer. That is a process that is a physical process that takes consciously saying, I am going to go to the computer. So, you know, when you go to the computer, don't go to those sites or think differently, or, you know what I mean? It's a conscious control thing. So you have to exercise some control in your own life, and that's step one. If we can't control ourselves, then well, we see what's going on as a result of that in society all over the place. There are a lot of examples of people that can't control themselves, and that is part and parcel of what we're in as far as this muck and mire that we have to wade through on a daily basis. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello? Hello, caller?
Hello.
Hi, are you there? Hello? Are you there?
Hi. Oh,
You're
know what? Hey, I went in the other room because I thought it was going to echo. Anyway, hey, so my question to you is, how can creative thinking circumvent the malady of our current situation? And the malady to which I'm speaking is the Republican takeover, I mean, which is due to not enough minorities and 18 to 24-year-olds getting out to vote. Why hasn't anything been done about that, and why aren't there enough
Okay, I can speak to
thinkers?
that. Let me go ahead and speak to that real quick, like. That is a complex issue, and whether you choose, again, that's going to be the big stickler with that is whether you choose to believe that the electoral process is actually counts. Does the vote that we punch in, whether it's the computer vote or the paper ballot, does that actually count towards an election, or are there individuals behind the scenes with other ulterior motives and objectives and agendas that are basically hijacking our vote? It's either or. I don't think there's much, I mean, there's one or the other. I don't think there's much middle ground in that sense. And I personally feel like it's very convenient if you see how everything is played out with all the control being Republican, and so that any agenda that's a Homeland Security type issue or what have you, or anti-terrorism so-called agenda, will be very easy to push through these days. And so we have to be cautious of that. What can be done in the sense of creative thinking? That's a good point, because I was going to bring that up anyway. There's much talk of the so-called New World Order and you hear policy-making bodies screaming that we're going to have another attack on American soil, that we need to be aware of that, and that if we don't do this, that, and the other, that we're going to have a more severe or more intense attack on American soil. And you see that these policy-making bodies, these individuals, are screaming, and that they are very, very flustered and frustrated that they're not able to ram these agendas through as quickly as they'd like. And so being stifled, they are being very frustrated. And so they're really trying to go full tilt and really, really put the fear into individuals, especially in America, that something bad is going to happen if we don't do certain things. But the body language and their demeanor and everything that how they're expressing these ideas is key to how they're really feeling and what's really going on. They are in a state of flux, they're in a state of fear, and they're in a state of unrest and disorganized and chaotic state. And there's a lot of wrangling going on behind the scenes as to what's going to pan out and shake out as official policy. And so they're very fearful as to people right now, how they're reacting to this terrorist attack of September 11th, and how successively, since time has elapsed since then, how have we reacted? Well, we've reacted overall relatively nonchalantly. Certainly there was an initial patriotic fervor, but then it's kind of quieted down into just a calm kind of underneath the surface, just an awareness of what took place. And that is very frustrating to those individuals and these policy-making bodies, because they see that there's an apathetic sense among the public. They tend to forget that they've already desensitized the masses through the video games, the movies, and through all kinds of mass media outlets. We've been desensitized to such a degree that after these attacks take place, a few months later, we're unfazed by the whole thing, and we're just like, okay, what's next? What's the next news topic that we have to deal with, the next news event? And so, rather than concentrating, we should be aware of what these people are intending to do, those that wish to enslave us or trying to put upon us. We should be aware of it, but rather than working actively to tear down what they're working on, I would suggest and recommend that individuals concentrate and contemplate on their own creative endeavors in light of and in spite of this activity that's going on to make this negative totalitarian version of a new world order. I think it's very important for individuals to be aware that there are a lot of other people around the world that are working at various levels, offering up their skills and abilities to try to help humanity. And so this overwhelming creative expression of helping and healing and the work of salvaging the race is going to far outweigh the motives and the means of this handful of few individuals that have been able to hijack our electoral process and hijack a lot of legislation and hijack the media and really kind of control what we view and how a public opinion is perceived. And so in order for us to, again, win back this new world order and make it a spiritualized, creative process for the benefit of many as opposed to for the benefit, of just a few, that we have to work in a creative process. And that, again, is working on diligently, one-pointedly, to help others in light of and in spite of this seeming adversity and this chaotic activity and this shouting from these talking heads, from these political, from these policy-making bureaus that run politics and that create policy behind the scenes, to not be intimidated by what they say and to, again, continue just to live our lives and not be fazed by these threats, whether they're perceived as idle threats or what have you. It doesn't matter. Just I would recommend and encourage people just to think, and be aware, but not be fearful. Not be fearful of these things, because these individuals that wish to enslave us at the highest levels are truly the ones that are in fear right now. These are the ones that are trying to bring out these policies that they think are going to further take away our freedoms, our free expression, our free mobility, and that they're going to infringe on that more so and more so by these policies that they think that we're just going to eagerly open up to and accept. And they are not having that success in that respect. They're seeing that their efforts are being sidetracked, they're being dismantled at different levels, and the leaks, the inside leaks and what have you that keep coming out, that keep sidetracking and circumventing and squelching their efforts, continue to happen. And so that is part of our faith and our hope as well, that we see that there are so many people aware that are putting out their own constructive endeavor and working out their own creative thinking in spite of seeming unrest, in spite of negativity all around us, that we still put our head down, we still work and carry on and think in that one-pointed, focused manner in spite of whatever's going on. And that is, in my estimation, the best way. We create in spite of the seeming adversity, and this positive creation will far overweigh as momentum sways and incrementally the tables are turned into an interpretation of a more spiritual one world order, because we have a one world order that's not very, it's not, you can't really argue that one way or the other. It's difficult to dismiss that. It's very readily apparent to anybody that has two eyes that we have a one world order. It's just, how is it going to pan itself out? We can follow the screaming heads, talking heads of the policy-making bodies and follow their advice and give in to their dictates and directives, or we can stand on our own 2 feet and create and work together and be understanding that there are many others out there that are working, and be aware of that living network of light that encircles our globe and that is part and parcel of this creative expression that is slowly working its way, and increasingly so, more so as we move forward into the future, that's turning the tables and turning the tide and turning around this interpretation of this New World Order and making it something that can actually be for the many and not just for the few, and that is my hope. So as far as the election process, those that wish to enslave us are going to make sure that things work out in their best interest at different levels. But it's good to be aware, but not fearful, and to work on in spite of these seeming difficulties. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, what time does your show go off?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
Uh-huh.
Okay, got to make this real quick.
Go ahead.
First off, the only difference between Democrats and Republicans don't use grease. Second of all, I'm one of the co-producers of the African American Freedom Information that your Negro Preacher Doesn't Want You to Know show. I talked with you earlier. And
right.
You're right, we do have to be open. I'm a black person, and I cannot be mad at white people for writing for anything at any time, because knowing what I know now, I have to be real positive. If you go back, I did find out that there were some flaws in carbon dating, but if you just look around at any picture you ever see with color in it, it all comes from one color. It's black. It's the carbon atom. So anything that it contains a carbon atom is basically replicated through male and female replication. The cosmic attribute, male attribute, and the female attribute is what brought everything together. So when you talk about God, there's no person up in the sky, and everybody keeps talking about it's a he. But what about the male and female? You know what I'm saying? What about the Heavenly Father and the Heavenly Mother? Now, when you take it back to the Amun-Ra story, they said that the earth came out of water, darkness, and chaos. Now, didn't you come out of your mother's womb out of water, darkness, and chaos? Well, why is there suddenly another different version of the story? I mean, the story of Jesus was the 16th story of the different played-out scenes, but it all goes back to the original. Remember Jaws? There's nothing like the original. Star Wars or whatever episode you want to say, there's nothing like the original. So you have to go back to the beginning no matter what. Anytime, don't stop your religion or anything. Keep going right on. It keeps you in your sanity. But just remember, at the end of your prayers, when you say Amen, you're attributing that to the African philosophy of religion and science, no matter what. I mean, it's Amun-Ra is stamped its name in the crust of the earth, so you can't get rid of it. There's no, you can say, oh, that it doesn't believe it. It's there, no matter whether you like it or not, whether you've been to Africa or not. So I just wanted to get that out real quick. And, you know, for all the other listeners, African American Freedom Information show that your Negro preacher doesn't want you to know show. We'll be coming back on. We'll be in competition, but I did want to agree with you that you have to be open. And if you're going to be open, take it back to the beginning. I mean, I used to go to the Muslim meetings with the black Africans. I mean, you know, the Muslims and stuff with Farrakhan and them, and he ran it by me real quickly, but he said, "Oh, that stuff goes back to the Medunetter and all that other stuff, but we have to deal with today." Well, if you only deal with today and don't remember the past, you're doomed to repeat it. Look what happened in the past 400 or 500 years that black people went through, but they can't talk about their Holocaust. Oh, but we can talk about the Jewish Holocaust and their 7-year. And you know the Jews run the media anyway, so that kind of tells you who else.
Hey, I'm going to let you go, but I do appreciate your comments. Let me go ahead and finish with that off air, just quickly to follow up. Okay, I don't have much time, so I got to wrap up quickly. I do appreciate you taking the time to view, and I do remember speaking with you. I would say, though, that I wouldn't necessarily look at it as competition or adversarial in the fact that you have a particular viewpoint on your show, and I have taken the time to view the show. I felt like some good, useful information, but I do feel like the individual that was the main person, and sorry I don't remember the guy's name, that was portraying the philosophy, there is some truth to that, and you cannot discount the history of black individuals throughout time. But we're all here, so I think it's more important for us to try to see ways that we can work together, and certainly to be open and aware help us out tremendously. And I would commend you for at least, you know, causing different individuals to raise their eyebrows, to think a little bit, and to kind of consider another way of looking at things, just because, you know, it's best not to be so closed-minded. So again, I would thank you for taking the time to view. Don't know that I'm going to get this last call in here, so I thank you for everyone that's taken the time to call and that's held on so long. I don't think I'm going to get this last call in. But I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to view. We are here every Thursday from 9 to 10 on Channel 10. Again, you just saw the scroll for the metaphysical, philosophical meeting that we have every third Wednesday of the month at Opal Divine, 700 West 6th Street, from around 8 o'clock until at least 11, sometimes later. And I would encourage everyone to come down on the 20th to take a look at that, or to be a part of that and to get involved with us. It's a pretty low-key affair. And I would like to also encourage everyone to stay tuned this upcoming Tuesday, 10 o'clock, Channel 10, for Therefore I Am, Jeff Contreras. If you want to check out some other shows that have a similar subject matter as this show. And I'd like to just thank everybody for taking the time to view. I'd like to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. Have a nice evening. Thanks, Austin.